One rainy afternoon, a young and beautiful girl came to a guy saying, "Marry her." The guy was very surprised by her offer. He didn't expect her to do that. The girl was desperate. She asked to live. "Only 3 years here. She'll be quieter than a mouse, won't bother anyone," the girl said, and then discreetly just disappeared. The boy asked, but why should he accept her offer? The girl, hearing such words from the guy, thought, "What about it? She has nowhere to go if she gets kicked out of here." Then she just has no way out, she thought, and told the guy that she knew what he was hiding. "Hiding it?" the boy replied. He was a little scared at first, but then a strong bolt of lightning struck the house, right through the roof. There was a very loud rumble. The girl was scared and screamed. She didn't expect that. And the guy, at this point, laughed as if he'd done it. But eventually he said to her, "Okay, let's get married." That's how the girl married Aslan Tordel. It was a very rich wedding. There were many guests. But guests attending the wedding, discussing the bride and groom, as they always do, said, "Unbelievable. There are just no words." One of the men said, "He thought the Duke of Tordel is good to everyone, but apparently his women's taste is so bad. He can't believe he's brought rumors upon himself for such a bride." The ladies attending the wedding were also gossiping. One of them said, "A girl from a simple family and not at all pretty. How could she attract the Duke?" Everyone thought that maybe the girl was hiding some talent that no one knew about yet. Because of that talent, the Duke took her as his wife. The main character knew what people would think when they found out he married her, for she has read it in a novel. She is now inside a novel she read in her past life. At the age of 10, she woke up remembering her past life. At first, she thought these memories had nothing to do with her. After all, her life had been ordinary, from a humble family. So far, everything in her life was going smoothly, just as it was written in that book. It was as if her fate was already predetermined, and there was nothing she could do about it. And here she became Aslan's wife for 3 years. She is now the Duchess of Tordel, as described in the novel. After all, not the sea current, not the direction of the wind can't be changed. It was a fate her heart could not resist. As she stood on the balcony, her now husband Aslan came up behind her and threw his shirt over her, having told the girl that the wind was cold, his lady. Of course, according to the story of the novel, she fell in love with him. She's even fine with being a contract spouse. The important thing is that she's there for him. She really wanted the happiness to never end, and she lived like that for a very long time. And then 3 years later, the day came. A butler came into the palace, and the maids they were carrying luggage. The butler, turning to the girl, said, "Come in." And to the maids and servants he said, "Put the luggage in one place." At that moment, our protagonist was just coming down and saw the servants arguing among themselves, saying, "Careful, don't break anything." The next image she could see was a girl with red hair standing next to her husband, Aslan. It was just the two of them. When the girl saw the mistress, she greeted her immediately, saying that she was glad to meet her. "Mistress, her name is Rosalind Feridod." And then the protagonist remembered that Rosalind is the girl who stole Aslan's heart. Rosalind said she was indebted to their house and was glad to see them. The girl was sincere and smiling, but only our protagonist was completely upset when she saw this girl. She remembered everything. At some point she began to feel sick and started to faint. Even though she was still on the steps, she couldn't help herself and fainted. Naturally, she flew down all those stairs. Aslan managed to pick her up in time so she wouldn't hit so hard. But our heroine knew that someday that day would come, and here it is. The protagonist of the novel is Aslan Tordel, who fell in love with Rosalind at first sight. Determined to live with her for the rest of his life, he ended his marriage to his wife after 3 years, and made Rosalind his lawful wedded wife, with whom he lived all his life. What about our heroine? What happened to her? No one ever knew. What happened to her? Where did she go? What was her life like? After all, the main characters in this novel are Aslan and Rosalind. And she is only the Duchess of Tordel, her name barely mentioned in the novel. She's a minor character, so nobody knows her name yet, and she remains the Duchess of Tordel for us. When after some time the Duchess of Tordel came to herself, opening her eyes in her room, on her bed, Aslan stood nearby and asked, "Have you come to your senses? How are you feeling, mistress?" Aslan got up to run, saying he would call a healer. "Wait a bit," but the Duchess stopped him, saying she was fine, yanking him by the sleeve. "It's just so he can be near her first." Then Aslan returned and stayed with her, taking a jug of water. He poured a glass for her to drink a little. Offering her a drink of water, he leaned toward her, handing her the glass in his hands. While the Duchess drank the water, he said, "You should see a physician. You fainted for no reason." The Duchess replied that it's really all right, she's not sick. The girl said she was just surprised that you brought a strange girl home so suddenly. Aslan himself did not realize that he could thereby frighten his wife. So he was surprised when he said, Apologizing, the Duchess said. She spoiled the whole atmosphere, and she would like your guest to have another proper meeting with her. Aslan replied, "Don't worry. It's his fault for bringing a guest and not telling you." Aslan said that this girl was a distant relative of his. He met her by chance and learned about her difficult situation. Our protagonist knew all this, because it was described in the novel. The heroine Rosalind became an orphan due to a sudden tragedy and was sold to a rich old man to cover her debts. Aslan, her distant relative, met her by chance, took pity on her, and paid off all her debts. He promised to take care of her and brought her to his house. "She won't be here long," Aslan said. "I'll try to find a suitable match for her. Hopefully before next spring she can start a new life, meeting a good man." Aslan, laying his hand on the arm of his Duchess, said, "Therefore, madam, I beg you to let her stay here for a year." Our heroine knew that nothing would change even if she kicked her out now, so she told her husband Aslan, "That's what we'll do." No matter how much she went out of her way to change the novel, in the end it would be as it was written. Aslan, who heard the Duchess's approval, said, "Thank you for your understanding. In just 1 week, a lot has changed." In the palace drawing room, Rosalind is sitting with a basket of roses, and her friends are sitting beside her. The girls are talking. One of the girlfriends says, "Oh my God, Lady Rosalind, it's all for you?" And the other girlfriend says, "What is it?" "A love letter. How romantic." Holding up an envelope that was in a basket of roses, Rosalind replied that she was sure he was only looking out for her, as she knew nothing here. The girls began to shower her with compliments. "Ha ha, how are you? Maybe so modest?" "That's right. They wouldn't be surprised if you were the mistress of this mansion." "Lady Rosalind, you're so noble. It's like you've always lived here." Rosalind replied, "Don't say that. This mansion already has a mistress." At the same moment, our Duchess Sardell came out. Rosalind immediately jumped up and greeted her. Duchess Sardell said, "She will come to us, please." "What fun you're having," said the Duchess, though she was embarrassed. Rosalind's girlfriends all cringed and looked at each other and the Duchess, judgmentally. A familiar situation, she thought. No matter how hard she tried, they never accepted her. She couldn't win these girls' favor for 3 years, and Rosalind did it in a week. Rosalind asked, "Mistress, are you feeling better?" She wanted to visit you, but they told her you were still sick, so she couldn't come. The Duchess replied, "I'm fine, thank you for your concern. I feel much better now." Rosalind continued the conversation, saying she wanted to ask her something anyway. Taking the Duchess under her arm, she took her aside and said, "Come for a moment." The girl was dragging her across the hallway, and the Duchess couldn't figure out what was wrong. Then at last Rosalind let her go, and the Duchess asked, "Do you have a question for her?" Rosalind hesitated and didn't know how to ask, but then finally dared, and said that she had actually heard strange rumors from other noble ladies. The Duchess interjected, "Strange rumors, or what kind of rumors?" Rosalind mumbled for a long time, but then she spoke again. "They said Aslan kidnapped you and forced you to marry him." And then the Duchess was very surprised. She had a look on her face as if she had seen a ghost. Immediately she replied, "Of course, she doesn't believe it at all. As she has seen, Aslan is not such a reckless man." "It is true, madam," said Rosalind. But the Duchess was silent and could say nothing as yet, because she recalled all those rumors when she first married Aslan, how her father used to say, "Aslan Tordel is a vile scoundrel. He is a criminal who kidnapped his daughter and forced her to marry him." Also, other ladies were talking and discussing about how even the bride's family is against this marriage. So why is Aslan Tordel being stubborn? They don't know what's going on there, but they're sure that Aslan Tordel is making a huge mistake. Also, the men discussed, as did the women, how mesmerized he was by her that he had gone to such lengths. Is she really that beautiful? And one of his friends said, "Helena Laren, never heard her name before." Then Helena is our protagonist who is driving this whole story. She walked up to Aslan and asked, "Are you sure you'll be okay after hearing rumors like that?" And then Aslan answered her, "Isn't that what you wanted? So that your parents would not touch you, you would marry him and become Duchess and Tordell. That was your agreement, wasn't it? Replied Helena. It was a second memory that Ahelina returned to, but we are brought back to reality where Helena is standing in front of her and questioning her mistress. And then Helena said, "A very caring man. Don't believe these rumors." Helena then said that she was apologizing and she would be the first to leave. And Rosalind was left standing puzzled at what Helena had answered her. Aslan Tordell, the sole heir of the Tordell family with centuries of history. A young duke who has it all: wealth, power, and stunning good looks. He was perfect until Helena showed up. But even so, she had no other choice. It was all about getting away from the Lauriston family. It all started when she was 10 years old. She was a little girl walking down the street with a bag of bread in her hands. Out of nowhere, a trio of horses sprang out from around the bend and nearly crushed her. The coachman was able to pull away in time and the horses turned the other way, but the girl fell and scattered all the bread. And most likely you popped some strange woman walking up to the girl. She asked, "Helena?" The girl looked at her and couldn't understand who Helena was, who this woman was addressing. But when the woman saw the girl's eyes, she exclaimed once more, "Helena," and laughed, not her own laugh, like a mad woman. Then she pounced on the girl and started hugging her, telling her that she was alive, her daughter. The girl couldn't understand who Helena was, but she realized that the woman was addressing her by her first name, so she said, "Excuse me, madam? She doesn't know Helena?" While this woman, the mistress, was hugging the girl, a butler jumped out of the carriage and rushed to his mistress. He grabbed her under the arm and said, "Mistress, come to your senses. Helena is dead." And he started pulling her away literally, but the woman was lashing out and begging for this girl, screaming, "No!" The farther this man took the woman, the louder she yelled, "Helena!" When they put the woman in the carriage, the maid and more assistants got out. The man turned around and said, "What the—" And he too said the name Helena. Moving closer to this girl, he began to examine her face, her hair. Then he said that of all the ones they had seen, that girl looked the most like Helena. The man sat down and asked, "How old is she, girl?" That same night she was kidnapped, grabbed and dragged away by men unknown in black hoods and cloaks. All the girl could scream was "Mommy" and "Daddy" and "Help! Help!" When her parents heard, they rushed after her, but there was nothing they could do. The kidnappers were already far away. The parents shouted, "Bring our daughter back, Riley, come back!" And from that day forward, our protagonist from Riley became Helena Lauriston. For the sake of the lady who had gone mad over her dead daughter, Earl Lauriston gave her Riley as a replacement. Of all those who came here, she is most like her, the maids discussed. Fate has favored her, they said. The father now with this girl said that if she did well as Helena, she could live her life, and as a noblewoman she would have everything. But if she fails in this role, just like the two girls before her, she too will die. The maids were discussing in all corners, thinking that the Count was certainly too kind to do such a thing for his crazy wife. He has nothing left. He doesn't want to lose his wife's inheritance. That's why he did that, and that's why he pleases his wife in everything. The girl, our heroine, would sometimes, when left alone in the room, cry very bitterly. Then she was not Helena, but Riley. The girl had but one hope. When Mrs. Lauriston died, she would not be needed either, and would be sent away. And she could finally return to her old life, to her family. And now the day she'd been waiting for had arrived. Many times Lauriston wouldn't let her go. And the reason was this. The Count asked his assistant. He said, "It was a madwoman who made the will." Yeah, she left her entire estate to her daughter. It says here that until Helena is an adult, no one can touch her inheritance. And this was not in the Count's plans. He got very angry and shouted, "Then just kill this girl. If she dies before marriage, all the property will go to him." Well, there was a condition, his assistant said. There was another condition. If Helena died before she was of age, the entire inheritance had to be donated to God. "Damn it," shouted the Count. "It can't be helped. Then ban her from the attic. Let her sit there until she comes of age." So she was locked in the attic, and she was treated worse than a servant. When the maids came to visit her in the attic, they would say, "Hey, Helena, your dinner," and throw her a plate. It was very hard for her, but she could no longer pretend to be someone else. She was relieved. But her calm didn't last long on that. The door opened and she heard, "Oh my God, it's that problem girl." After the death of her mistress, The count's mistress immediately became his second wife. One of her sons said, "What a pretty sister, and he likes her." It was Glock, the count's illegitimate son. He made her life hell, made her clean his room. He kept sneaking up behind her and trying to hug her, saying if he was tired, he could rest in his room for a while, and only his mother could stop him. She told him not to talk to that girl. "Helena, these are your clothes for the ball next week. Wash them yourself." Passed some dress to Helena. The second wife worried and complained to the earl that, "Dear, when Helena leaves their not home, she worries that because of her, their son will step on the wrong track." But the count said to be patient. He'd soon get it all sorted out. To show that Helena still is alive, she was sometimes forced to participate in social events. She met Aslan at an event. He was walking by and dropped his handkerchief. She picked up this handkerchief and said, "Sorry, you dropped it." When the boy turned around, he saw Helena and his handkerchief and said thank you to the lady who took it back. The girl said, "You're welcome." But when she looked at the guy, she thought, this is the first time she's seen such a handsome man. The guy, to strike up a conversation, said he treasured that handkerchief very much and almost lost it. The guy introduced himself. "He's Aslana Tordel." Elena thought she'd heard that name somewhere. It was very familiar. Then Aslan said, "Not to be rude, may he know your name?" And the girl introduced herself. "And Helena Lauriston." Aslan said, "You have returned an important item to him and he wants to thank you for it." Elena got embarrassed and started to say, "No need, she didn't do anything like that at all." Aslan said that even if you don't need anything now, you can say what you want later. The guy held out his hand to her, and in his hand was a ring. He said, "Take this. If you have a request, come to the Tordel mansion and show it to me and I will fulfill your wishes." As he left, the guy said, "Hope to see you again." When Helena got home, her thoughts were all about Aslan and the Duchess. Then suddenly she remembered it was the name of the main character from that novel. Come to think of it, the Duchess's name was Helena Laren, the same as hers. Taking that ring in her hands, looking at her, the girl had no thoughts. She can't be a duchess, and they won't even meet again, she thought, wrapping the ring in her handkerchief. She said she'd just keep the ring as a memento, just have to hide it well. As Helena hid the ring, her half-brother snuck into her room saying, "Helena, what are you doing?" he asked the girl. He has a conversation with her. The boy said, "She knows her mother wants to marry her off to a dying old man, doesn't she? Isn't it better to live with him than to be sold to a nasty old man?" And he put his arm around her. But Helena pushed his hand away and stepped aside. Then her brother said to her, "You shouldn't act so cold towards him." He continued, "Her real parents. Doesn't she wonder where they are now?" Helena turned around, and when she heard about her parents, she ran up to the guy and asked, "Does he know where her parents are?" He replied, "Sure, they came here when they were looking for her." The girl thought probably her father and asked, "And what became of him?" The boy replied, "Her father ordered her family killed. Nothing has happened yet, but they ran away like rats." And Helena asked then, "Where are they now?" He put his arm around her and whispered in her ear, "Lay him down, since you want to know so badly." Started to hug her and untied her belt from behind, saying if he was in a good mood, maybe he'd find it, and secretly from his father. Helena thought she would have to be patient to see her parents again. She pictured her mother who would say to her, "Riley, her most favorite daughter." Mother's words would be, "Don't hold back for anything if someone hurts her." When her brother was about to untie his belt, Helena fumbled for the candlestick near her hand. Taking that candlestick in her hands, she charged back over her head. He collapsed in pain. The girl was very frightened. She didn't know how to be, what she should do now. And she saw her handkerchief with the ring wrapped in it. She should run, grabbing that ring, Helena said. Taking it in, she thought her family was looking for her, and she must run away from here and survive. "If you have a request for her, come to the Tordel mansion and show it to her." Those words Helena remembered, as she looked at the ring. And then she let loose with all her might to run to Castle Tordel, away from here. It was just raining that day. The girl got very wet while running. When she arrived at the mansion, she showed the ring to Aslan and asked, "Do you remember her?" She introduced herself again, saying she was Helena Laren, and bowed. Helena was all tearful, and the Duke wiped away her tears. "The girl said that the other day at the banquet, you told her to find you if she had a favor to ask." Aslan said he thought, "You need to change your clothes first. You're icy and very wet. Why are you so dressed in light on such a cold evening? It's raining. You're soaked." The girl lowered her head. and said she apologized for dirtying your mansion. Aslan rang the bell for one of the servants to come. Turning to the girl, he said, "That he doesn't know what the matter is, but first change into dry clothes and later he will listen to you." When the butler came into the room, Aslan said, "Take care of this girl." Then the butler took her to a fancy bathtub where the maids helped her wash herself and warm herself in the warm water. Helena, as she lay in the bathtub, she smelled the scent of lilacs. It was her favorite scent. Then the girls helped me get dressed in a clean, fresh dress. She didn't even understand how Aslan had gotten a dress her size. The Duke's single, and he has no sisters. When Helena was ready, she went down to the Duke and said, "Thank you for being so kind to her." The guy said, "Now they can talk. You came in late at night to ask him for something." Helena fell to her knees in despair, and all she could say was, "Marry her." She thought that if she died unmarried, all the property would go to her father. And if he were to kill her while she was still married, all the property would go to her husband. So Count Florestan would never leave her side. She asked to be allowed to live here for only 3 years. She'll be as quiet as a mouse, and then she'll disappear quietly. He asked, "And why should he accept your offer?" The girl replied, "She has an inheritance from Countess Laurestine, which she will receive when she comes of age. If you marry her, she will give it to you." Aslan said he was not one for possessions, and the Duchy of Tordel was not poor. What to do? Thought Helena. She had nowhere to go if she got kicked out of here, and then she had to— Helena Laren from the novel threatened Aslan and forced him to marry her for 3 years. All because Helena knew Aslan's secret. And then now it wasn't Helena who said she knew what you were hiding. At that moment, a very strong thunder rumbled and struck the roof of the palace. Helena was very frightened, twitching with that thunder. And then Aslan smiled as if he knew something, just like last time, and said, let's get married." That's how they became married 3 years ago, sitting on the bench, Helena recalled. At this moment, while Helena was sitting on the bench and reminiscing, Rosalind was standing right next to them, talking to Aslan and asking him questions. She says to Aslan, "What are you saying? It's just an arranged marriage." At that moment, Elena heard what they were talking about and paid attention, turning her head toward them. Aslan said, "Yes, at Helena's request, they have agreed that they will live as spouses for 3 years. Then Rosalind said you married your mistress, not because you love her. And I said, there was no mention of love in their contract." The boy himself began to wonder, telling Rosalind that they had simply agreed not to bother each other for those 3 years. When Helena heard all of this, she was very upset, even though she already knew this was how it was going to be. But it was still hurtful. She ran away from the garden crying. Though an arranged marriage may not be desirable, she thought. Yes, and in the novel, Elena and Aslan were not on good terms. There was no room for love in their relationship. Still, there were moments when the Duke would make a request of Helena. How much longer would she call him so formally? But Helena would answer then, "What shall I call you?" The guy came closer and closer to her and said then, "Call him Aslan. They are husband and wife," he said, stroking her face. The girl thought, Helena didn't seem to call Aslan by his first name in the novel. Yes, and Aslan, unlike Roman, was strangely kind to her. When they took a walk in the garden, he always asked, "Do you like this walk?" Aslan said he had prepared them as a wedding gift. "It's hard for you to live in an unfamiliar place, so now you have a place to relax." Accordingly, Helena said, "How did you know these were my favorite flowers?" "Thanks to you," Aslan replied, "and I recognize the beauty of these flowers." "Thank you," he answered her. Because of that time, she had hoped that things could be different. But her reputation was still as terrible as in the novel. She never seemed to have studied, and people discussed her when she came to social gatherings. They said it was the first time they had ever seen a duchess who didn't know the rules of etiquette, or said how such a girl had managed to get the Duke of Tordel. Aslan was very attentive and noticed always when she wasn't feeling well, telling her that his spouse, "You are very pale," suggested to her, "If you are tired, you can go to rest. You mustn't overwork yourself. You're so fragile." Aslan's attitude towards her was very different from what it was in the novel. He always looked after her and worried about her. And the girl thought for a moment that he might love her. Thus a futile hope was kindled in her. It was all her fault, but the phrase from the novel in the same situation. At her request, we agreed that we would live as spouses for 3 years. So you married your mistress. Not because you love her, There was no mention of love in their contract. Helena had only had those words running through her head, that they had agreed not to bother each other for those 3 years. In the end, everything is just as it says in the book, as if she is trapped in a fate that is already predetermined, and nothing can be changed. Helena fainted from frustration. She was seen by a maid who ran up with the words, "Madam, let me help you." Helena was brought into the room and laid on the bed to recover and rest a bit. The maids outside the door were whispering that she had fainted again, but lately she seemed to be getting better. Why had it come back on again? When Helena woke up, she was once again immersed in her thoughts. When she had lived with the Lauriston family, her body had weakened greatly due to the constant stress and abuse. The girl felt someone apply a compress to her. Seeing through the slight mist in her eyes, she noticed his hand. She thought it was Aslan's hand and he was wooing her. Though no, that can't be it. Most likely it must be the hand of the maid's wife. She couldn't hear anything because of the ringing in her ears, and can see practically nothing, and for the shroud in front of her eyes. But then after a while she heard the words, "Please open your eyes, my consort." The voice was Aslan's. Walking in, the maid said, "Sir, she will look after the mistress. You may rest now." Well, Aslan replied that everyone out, he would stay here, not to let anyone in so as not to disturb the mistress resting. And the maid said, "Pardon me, but Lady Rosalind has come to see her." Aslan replied, he said, he told her not to let anyone in. When the maid left, Aslan covered Helena with a blanket and waited beside her for her to open her eyes and come to her senses. He thought she was unconscious, so he talked to her. He said he didn't know what to do. Every time she fainted, he took Helena's hand, put his arm around her and leaned her against him. Then he kissed her delicate fingers and asked her not to be sick so long. While Aslan was tending to Helena, there was Rosalind standing in the hallway in front of the room waiting for the maid to come out. Rosalind asked, "Did you accurately convey that she had come?" And the maid replied, "Yes, the master said not to let anyone in." Rosalind, when she heard those words, she was a little upset. She hadn't expected him to say that at all. Turning around, the girl proceeded to her room. As she walked, she saw the servants running. She thought they were running when they heard that the Duchess had fainted. The girl was walking and thinking. They had agreed not to bother each other for those 3 years, but he had said they hadn't married for love. So why was he so worried about her now? Rosalind looked at their portrait and thought, well, if the contract lasts 3 years, their marriage will soon be over. He would no longer have to be associated with someone who couldn't properly play the role of Duchess, Rosalie thought. All the society ladies say she is very suitable for the role of Duchess, better than Helena. The gossip of these ladies was such that because of that wife, Herzog Tordel was shrouded in bad rumors. Under the pretext of poor health, she practically did not appear in secular society. Or it was said that she always looks around like a commoner. But Lady Rosalind is very graceful and confident. It is said that the Duke personally invited her to join him in the capital. There were rumors such as, and some have heard, that he immediately covered all her debts. Though he was not the kind of man interested in charity, he seems to have fallen under Lady Rosalie's spell. Thought that looking at the fact that, after years they still haven't had a child, it's obvious they have an arranged marriage and don't love each other. That Aslan is very caring, too kind, so he just couldn't turn his back on the poor girl. If Rosalind keeps up her act, it's all in her hands, and Helena's place can be taken by Rosalie and become a real duchess. A little time passed, and Helena began to come to her senses. The maid who was near her saw this and asked, "Mistress, have you come to your senses yet? How are you feeling?" She helped the girl to sit down and said, "The master was very worried. After all, you've been sick for days." Helena asked Aslan, "Been here?" "Yes, he's been with you the whole time, but he stepped out briefly as Lady Rosalind has something important to tell him." Helena hesitated. "Yes, he poured right away then, now." Elena thought she seemed to know why she was sick, but she didn't want to admit it. It's just time to go, and because of that, she's sick. Helena asked, "What day is today?" The maid looked at the calendar and said, "What day is today?" Helena got excited. Tomorrow was her birthday. Not Helena Lauriston's, but Riley Violet's. She immediately remembered what it was like in her own family. Mom and Dad and her little brother, and there was a big cake. She also remembered telling Aslan this, and the guy asked, "What, no one congratulated you on this birthday?" Placing his hand on Helena's arm, Aslan said, "He will always do that now, greeting you on your birthday." He said he didn't want her to be lonely on that day. Then Helena thought she wanted to spend one last day with him. Could she afford to be a little selfish? Then she said to Jen's maid, "Will you help her wash and change her clothes? She must ask something of Aslan." The maid replied, "Yes, mistress," pleased that she saw how pleased mistress was. Elena thought that this was definitely the last time, bringing herself into perfect order. She went to Aslan's place. Upon reaching his room, there was a knock on the door. She asked, "Aslan, are you there?" But the butler came up and said that Aslan had gone somewhere today. He was not in his room. "Ah, that's how it is," replied Helena. "When he comes back, tell him she came by and wanted to talk to him." Helena had just gotten to her room, went to the window to admire nature, and saw horses and a carriage. He had arrived, she rejoiced. Not much time had passed. Well, immediately she was upset. "Because you're out, not just in Rosalie. The girl." Frankly speaking, she was hanging all over Aslan, smiling, flirting. Elena stood by the window and saw it all. The girl was very upset again. Aslan and Rosalie also noticed her. Aslan turned around and looked toward her window and saw her come to her senses. Their gazes met. They saw each other. Elena then immediately turned away and moved away from the window. She didn't want him to think she was watching him. Rosalie asked Aslan, "What's the matter with you? Is someone there?" But the guy said he thought he was imagining things. Then he smiled and said he'd like to hear the rest of her story. Then Rosalie took him under her arm and suggested that we dine together so that she could tell the continuation of her story. Rosalie and Aslan walked together toward the palace. Helena looked out the window and saw it all, and she shuddered. Elena came in, sat down at her desk and looked at herself in the mirror. A butler entered the room who said, "The master sends word that he is dining with Lady Rosalie tonight." Helena turned and said, "Okay, it seems he's pretty busy," and she interrupted him. "Tell him it's okay now, don't let him worry." Helena remembered for a moment seeing Rosalie and Aslan outside by the carriage. Rosalie was so beautiful with her red hair and green eyes. It was as if they were made for each other. That's why she's the protagonist, Rosalie thought to Helena. The next morning, Elena left her room to go for a walk. A maid helped her. Rosalind met them in the hallway. She asked, "Mistress, are you awake?" Taking Helena under her arm, Rosalind continued the conversation. She was very anxious. "After all, you've been sick for so long. Are you feeling better now?" Helena replied, "Yes, thank you for your concern. I'm much better now." Rosalie said, "I wish you could have attended the ball last night. It was so much fun." Elena interjected, "At the ball? What ball?" "Ah," replied Rosalie, "Aslan was compelled to go alone on account of your being ill." So she asked, "May I take your place and keep him company?" Aslan happily agreed, Rosalie said, which made her have a great time. Rasoli continued chatting, saying that Aslan thanked her for going with him and gave her a new dress today. Helena asked again, "Today?" Rosalie said, "Yes, they drove down together and picked it out." Aslan is so thoughtful, isn't he? Helena was completely upset because today was her birthday, and only Aslan knew about it. That's what she thought. In the novel, too, they quickly bonded. Rosalind filled the place that Helena, the false wife, could not fill. She really is a minor character, Helena thought. Helena replied that she was happy for you. "Thank you for helping Aslan. Her body is still not strong enough. She wants to rest alone today." Helena turned around and went to her room. Remembering that kind Aslan had only taken pity on her, so promised such a thing that they would now celebrate her real birthday together. He then said that there was no way he would forget about this day, and would be sure to prepare everything himself. She's not entitled. It's normal for autoris tapenage to be forgotten as soon as the person in charge shows up. Helena went to the window and saw Rosalie and Aslan walking in the garden. She felt very hurt. He didn't belong to her from the start, what can you do? Then she thought it was probably time for her to leave. And then there was an unexpected turn in the walk. Aslan leaned over to Rosalie and said in her ear what he thought. "Feridod has entertained her, Rosalie. Enough already." Now he asked for the information she had promised to give him. Helena went to the window and admired the nature and the warm weather. The weather was very nice today. The sun was shining and there was a light breeze. The girl thought today was a good day to leave. Today was her birthday and the day their contracted marriage ended. Lena decided to tidy up before going out. She took a bath with her flowers to relax and pamper her body. Then she had her hair done. She thought Aslan was too polite. He wouldn't have been the first to ask her to leave, so it would be best if she bid him farewell herself. When Helena was fully prepared, she looked at herself in the mirror and thought, Aslan had been good to her for the last 3 years, so she should thank him. She decided to visit him in person by knocking on his door. She asked, "May I come in?" And a voice answered, "Come in." When Helena came in, Aslan asked how you were feeling. He heard you were awake. He was very busy last night and came when you were asleep. Helena said, she knows you have a lot to do, but she would like to talk to you. Aslan said first, "Have a seat. You still can't overwork yourself." As Helena sat down, she immediately remembered how they had signed a prenuptial agreement in this very spot 3 years ago. She said to Aslan, "Do you remember the day they signed the contract?" Aslan replied, "Of course I remember." Helena then replied that today was her birthday, which meant that their contract was coming to an end. Aslan, when he heard, was a little surprised, but maybe not. At that moment the butler knocked on the door. Entering, he said, "Sir, everything you ordered is ready." Aslan said, "Wait a bit." Aslan continued, "He's talking to the mistress," turning to the butler. But Helena said, "No need. If you need to, you can leave." She quickly blurted out that she'd only come to say goodbye. She stood up, bowed, and said, "She's grateful for everything, Aslan. Their contract is over, and she will leave the mansion today." Aslan sprang up from his seat, said, "Wait. He's done something wrong. If he's wronged you in any way, he'll make it right. Why are you leaving so suddenly?" The girl also stood up and said there was nothing wrong. "You have been very kind to her all this time. She sincerely wishes you happiness, Aslan." As she was leaving, she said, "Have a good stay, Aslan," and followed her and said, "Helena, wait." At the same moment Rosalie came into the room and said, "Aslan, if they don't come out now, they will be late." Aslan sat Helena down in a chair and said, "Stay a little longer. They will continue the conversation later." Already running out of the room, he asked, "If you are not satisfied with anything, he will fix it. He asks you to just wait a little while." As Helena left the room, she noticed that Aslan and Rosalie were arguing about something, but she hadn't heard what it was about yet. That's how it ended, her love. When she got to her room, she thought it didn't take long to get ready to leave. After all, she didn't have much luggage. She was worried that Aslan himself might misunderstand her. So she left the letter. She put the ring next to the letter. Taking her small suitcase, she was met by the butler who asked, "Madam, are you really leaving? The master will be back soon. He wanted to talk to you." "Dalton, thank you for your work," Elena said. Her maid also asked, "Mistress, would you mind telling me where you are going?" But Helena said no need. Aslan wouldn't want to know. Helena made her way to the exit. It was hard for her to leave this house. After all, she had lived here for 3 years. At the train station, the train. Helena took the ticket and was already sitting on the train. At the same time, Aslan and Rosalie were looking for someone, having gone into some room. Aslan's assistant said, "According to the information we've received, it's here." Aslan asked what had happened here. Dishes were lying around, things were scattered. But Rasori said she did say he was here. These are that man's personal belongings. "They seem to be a little late," Aslan's aide said. Aslan was a little angry. He thought he was sure to find him this time. The first thing he did when he married Helena 3 years ago, sent men to destroy the Lauriston family. It was easy to ruin Count Lauriston, who, with the help of his daughter, tried to stretch his hands into the railroad business of the Tordell family. After Count Lauriston died after going on a bender, his mistress Marissa and son Glock ran off like rats. After 3 years of pursuit, and the tracks were spotted in Baron Feridot's territory, it is said that Marissa seduced the Baron and spent all his wealth. Having lost everything, the Baron angrily killed Marissa and committed suicide. And Glock must have escaped again. Where is he now? Aslan's aide did not immediately know, and Aslan also heard rumors that Baron Feridot's only daughter was Glock's lover, Rosalind Feridot. Glock escaped and Rosalind Feridot was sold for her father's debts, the aide reported to Aslan, and then Aslan plotted that he must get close to Rosalind. If rumors spread that he had paid all her debts and moved her to his capital, Glock would try to get close to her again. That's what happened. He brought her to his mansion, and they were able to track down the location of the Glock that had come to Rosalind Feridot. He wouldn't miss him again. "Glock, Riston, find him," he told his subordinate aides. "Don't let him get away this time. He will take revenge on all those who wronged Helena." And so the train arrived at Air Station. Helena was on this train. Stepping out of the wagon, the girl looked around. This was new terrain for her. This is Elowood, a small and humble harbor village. This is where her real family lives. The girl read everything from the sheet on which the address was written. Thanks to Aslan, she had exchanged letters all these 3 years. If it was discovered that she wasn't Helena Lauriston, but a commoner, Aslan would be in trouble. So her parents went to live in a remote village. As we approached the first house with a purple roof, there was a woman and a guy standing outside the house. The woman saw the girl and said, "Oh my God, who's that over there?" Dropping the bucket of apples she was holding, she realized who she saw in front of her. The woman shouted, "Riley!" It was her mother, and her younger brother was standing next to her. When Helena saw her mom and brother, she cried a lot, but they were tears of happiness and joy. At last, after such a long time, they would be together. My brother started yelling, "Daddy, Daddy, come quickly to us, we have guests!" When the father came out, he saw his daughter and ran to her too, rather hugging her with the words, "Paradise or our daughter." Finally, after such a long time, their family was united. After all, the girl was only 10 years old when they broke up. By now, Riley was already apologizing to her parents that it had taken her so long to visit them. Mother said, what was she apologizing for? Father confirmed that they were so glad she had come back to them alive. Only the little brother laughed and said that the father cried more than the sister. After hugging their daughter, they followed into the house for her to rest from the road. My brother was showing the surroundings, what and where. This is their house. He introduced, pointing to a beautiful big house. Riley looked up, and her favorite flowers were blooming around this house, and she could easily tell it was their home. At the same time in the palace, Aslan returned from his trip because he had not caught Glock. When he came to Elena's room, he found a letter and a ring. After reading the letter from Helena, or already more correctly, the letter was written to Riley, the real her, to the Duke of Tordell. She is immensely grateful that you have taken care of her over the past 3 years. She will never forget your kindness and sincerity. She will pray that you will be happily married, Rosalie. We only had an arranged marriage, so hopefully Lady Rosalie didn't get it wrong. She leaves the deeds to her entire fortune and the prenuptial agreement they signed years ago. She will always be sorry and wish you happiness. Never ill. With gratitude, Riley. Aslan asked his servants why they didn't stop her. The butler said that he discouraged the lady. They said you would be back soon, but she left anyway. Aslan was upset because he knew it was a mistake. He shouldn't have left her behind. Remembering what the letter had said, how could she even think he would be with Rosalind? Aslan thought Riley might have heard their conversation in the garden where they had agreed to live as a married couple for 3 years. There's a good chance that Glock met with Rosalind. Therefore, it was necessary to hide that Helena was dear to him. Having learned Helena's true situation, Glock could intimidate Helena, considering it her weakness. So he deliberately fooled him by telling Rosalind everything. Tearing up the letter in anger and then crumpling it into a scrap of paper, Aslan thought she must have gone to her parents. Everyone not involved in the capture of Glock, go to Elohid. Protect the mistress, the butler replied that it would be done. Aslan said he'd go with them, prepare the train to Eloworld. While all his assistants were getting the train ready to leave, Aslan went to his room to calm his thoughts a bit by looking out the window and seeing the garden. He pulled a box from his pocket that contained a ring. He wanted to give her this gift after he finally dealt with her past. He would know that their arranged marriage of 3 years had passed, was coming to an end, and the real one was beginning. From the beginning, he had never thought of letting her go. He liked her a lot, too. 4 years ago, he started having a dream. In that dream, he was older than he is now, and he was in love with a girl. She, using his secret, forced him into marriage. And he, feeling betrayed, was forced to live with her in marriage for 3 years. But after 3 years, she left and he suffered and could not forget her. That's how he died alone. It was just a dream, but so realistic. The stuff is a dream, but he's so disbelieving of it. In the dream, he heard that girl's name, and that's when he tracked down Helena Lauriston. So there really is a girl by that name. She was in poor health, so she did not often appear in society. It was their first meeting then, at the ball. A girl whose name almost no one knew, blonde hair and an elegant build. She looks just as she did in the dream. If it was a dream, there must be some connection between them, Aslan thought. Then maybe she knows about him too, and he decided to slip her a handkerchief to start a conversation. dropping her handkerchief. Helena picked it up and said, "You dropped your handkerchief?" The moment he saw her face, all the feelings he had experienced in the dream came in a wave. And the moment he had first seen her in his dream, his heart had been pounding as frantically as it had at the ball. Holding out his hand with the ring to her, he said, "If you have a request, come to the Tortle mansion and show it to her." Then he just couldn't let her go, so he prepared a beautiful place. When he knew that Helena Lauriston really existed, he became obsessed with his dream. The outfit she wore in the dream he prepared, her candle scent he prepared, her favorite flowers, these are all things he saw in the dream. That's how he knows all her favorite flavors and scents. Osla began collecting everything that had anything to do with her and waited for the real Elena Lauriston. And then the day came when she came to him. She looked younger than she had in her dream. He didn't know what was wrong, but first, change into dry clothes. He said, and later he would listen to you. When the girl had changed her clothes, washed and dried herself, she came to him and said, "Thank you for your kindness." Aslan noticed that she was much more beautiful than in his dream. His heart was pounding like crazy, and he said to her, "Now we can talk. Did you come late at night to ask me for something?" And then Helena fell to the floor on her knees and asked him to marry her. Well, Aslan hesitated. He remembered that she was supposed to threaten him in his sleep. "So I decided to ask, why should I take you up on your offer?" And then the girl said she knew he was hiding something. Aslan said, "Hiding." But he saw Helena cough. And he then asked, "Are you in pain? Don't sit on the cold floor. You've been caught in a downpour." Holding out her hand to her, Helena thought she could not force marriage on such a kind man. She would rather plead with him, so she decided to tell the truth. She asked him to help her. Count Lauriston kidnapped her. Aslan wondered, why? Why did he kidnap you? And that's when the girl said she wasn't Helena Larry Stans and her name was Riley Violet. He said he'd kill her if she didn't pretend to be his dead daughter. When Duchess Lauriston died, leaving the entire inheritance to her, this was the first time Aslan had heard of it, for Lena had never spoken about herself in her pictures. The girl went on and on about everything. She hit Glock and ran away, remembering the thing he had given her. She felt sorry for asking him for such a thing so suddenly. The girl said that she thought she was completely out of her mind, but that she had no other way but to marry you, unfortunately. She thought all she did was give him back his handkerchief, and herself asking from such a thing must make him mad at her. But the guy smiled and said, "Ha!" As before, the story was told that he knew something. He really knew. Aslan himself wondered. Had Helena proposed marriage to him in the dream for the same reason? He hated her for betraying his love and spinning him around using his weakness, but his love overrode that hatred and sense of betrayal. He had never been curious about her present situation until the day she left him, so this time, he wouldn't make the same mistake again and told her, "Let's get married." The girl was in doubt as to how it was that he agreed so quickly, but Aslan came over and said, "Don't cry. He will do as you ask. It's cold in here. Get up." Holding out a handkerchief to her, he said, "Wipe your tears first. You don't really—" He thought it would be his thanks for the handkerchief she returned. After all, he is really very dear to him. Elena thought that Aslan was saying that for a simple handkerchief, he would marry her. She thought he would get angry and make her see what was wrong with him. Aslan asked her something interesting. "If he didn't honor your request, what would you do?" The girl replied, "Since you gave her the item, she would sell it and run away far away. Even though it wouldn't be easy, she would want to find her family." Aslan said it was a pretty risky plan. He thought she was very sincere, compared to Elena in the dream. Maybe it was because they had met a few years earlier. Aslan suggested she stay here. It was safer. If you want to meet your parents, he'll help you find them. "Really?" asked Helena. Aslan said, "How can he stand by after hearing your story? He is not that insensitive." Helena thought it was only out of pity that he couldn't get her out the door. She stood up and said, "Thank you." She was very grateful to him. He had really turned out to be very kind, Elena thought. From the beginning, their relationship was different. Aslan said her hair was still wet, dry off and eat, and then continue the conversation. A relationship where they loved each other, without any hatred or misunderstanding. Helena said she would never forget your grace, Duke. So there's no way he'll lose her this time, Aslan thought. Rosalind came out of the room. She saw all the maids fidgeting. She couldn't understand what was going on. She asked, "What are you doing?" stopping one of the maids. And the maid replied, "Ah, Lady Rosalind, the master has urgently ordered everything to be prepared for his journey." Rosalind asked, "Traveling? Where to?" And the maid replied, "Mistress has gone alone. It seems he is going to follow her." And all the servants were scurrying around saying to each other, "Quick, load up." Rosalind was surprised that their contract had come to an end. "But why would Aslan want that?" she asked the maid. The maid replied, "Mistress hasn't fully recovered yet. The master must be very worried." Pondered strangely they had said goodbye. She thought Aslan didn't care about this marriage, or she was wrong. She can't let these two meet again, and that's when something has to be worked out. Rosalie asked to fold her luggage too. She would miss Aslan going so far away, and she would go with him too. The maid said, But it seems so, sir. We'll be leaving quite soon." Rosalie replied, "She has very few things, so it's all right." "She'll tell you herself, so take care of her things," the maid replied. "Okay," and went upstairs to Rosalie's room. As the girl walked, she wondered if the mistress had left so suddenly. Aslan must be just confused. He would soon realize who really cared for him. At this time at Riley's house, mother and father have prepared a very nice lunch. The mother says, "Eat more, Riley." But what the girl replies, "It's Mom's chicken soup." In the meantime, the father calls his brother over to the table so they can all eat lunch together. The girl took one spoonful into her mouth and said how much she missed this soup. Her mother was very happy, saying that it certainly didn't compare to the food in Florestine County, but she had loved it when she was a child. Riley said, "Mom, no, nothing tastes better than your soup." That's when Dad said he would make his specialty soup next time too. The brother said to his sister, "She has become so beautiful, apparently Hertzia took good care of her." "Oh yes," Riley said. "Well, and Dad added saying that Hertzia helped them a lot. The whole time they didn't need anything." "My brother was supportive," said Wright. "They had an extremely hard time on the run, but our life got better once my sister got married." Then Riley said, "Aslan, oh no, Hertzia is very merciful. They all owe him a debt." Brother asked Riley, "He was very nice to her too, wasn't he?" Mom admonished, saying, "Aiden, be quiet." But the boy said, "It's just that the Duke always wrote 'Dear Father-in-law' and Mother-in-law in his letters." "It seemed like your parents really did have a son-in-law," their son said. The father added, "They're just very grateful to him for being nice to Riley." Aiden said that honestly, he thought she wasn't coming back. Mother jokingly covered his mouth, saying, "Aiden, come on, Riley would have come back to us anyway." He was pushy. He said his sister had written about Aslan too, only about him, as if she were really in love with him. The parents laughed, covering their son's mouth, saying, "Your brother has a tongue without bones, even if she has problems with the Duke. It's fine. After all, she has them, her family." "It's okay," Riley said. "She's not in any trouble. It's just that their contract ended and she came back as she didn't want to get in Aslan's way." But the girl conceived that after all these 3 years she had been unrequitedly in love with him. She was sure he had already forgotten her and was spending time with Rosalie. When Riley finished eating, she bowed and said, "Thank you for the meal, Mom." She went to unpack her luggage. Aiden, the brother, said to his parents when his sister left, "Don't you think she left home after having a fight with Aslan?" But Mom pointed her finger quietly. "Pretend not to notice anything until she decides to tell you herself." At the same time at Aslan's palace, the butler tells Aslan that he has booked a train to Eris. He needs to get off at the station and head towards Ellawood. At that moment, Rosalie was standing nearby. When she saw Aslan, she ran towards him shouting, "Aslan!" When she ran up, she said she heard he was going on a trip. He'll be bored alone. She's going with him. So he'll go by train too, how exciting. Rosalie laughed. He rushed to the exit saying, "You don't have a ticket, lady." "He thinks you can't go." Aslan told the butler as he escorted the lady inside, it was time to go. "We must hurry, still packing." And so the train left. Aslan was on it, he went to Riley's. Rosalie stayed in the palace. She was very angry. The girl asked the maid when Aslan would return. The maid replied that she did not know. The master had left without saying anything. But then the maid added that he was following the mistress. I think they would return when they had settled all her affairs. "These are all her clothes," the maid replied. Yes. There were suitcases of belongings standing beside her. Then angry, she said she needed new dresses. The maid asked, "More?" Angry, she said that the money Aslan had given her wasn't over yet. She could use it however she wanted. She can't be greeting a man tired after traveling in an unsightly outfit she's already worn. Then disrobed, followed to the store where she was able to try on many dresses and buy new ones. After trying on the dresses, spinning around near the mirror, she said she would take this one. The sales guy nodded his head. Okay, thank you, and come back again. When the girl went outside in her new dress, she walked toward the carriage and someone followed her. When the girl turned around, she saw a guy. She got scared, saying, "What the hell?" But the guy said, and she did. Lucky, his face couldn't be seen, but she recognized him by his voice. It was Glock Lauriston, standing in all his glory, pinning Rosalie against the wall. Guy said, "They say she revealed the Duke's location to the trade." Glock asked, "What about their past?" She betrayed him, his beloved. The girl shoved the guy away and said, "What past?" Shouting to him, she said when her father died, she was sold. He ran away, leaving her alone. Glock said, "Okay, he's very sorry. There was nothing he could do in that situation." But he seized the girl again and pressed her against the wall, saying, "But she gave him up to the Duke, too." Then the guy calmed down and started flirting with her, telling her that the Duke seemed to be treating her well. "How much money is she wearing now?" The girl screamed, "Don't touch her!" Glock said, "Apparently, having become the Duke's mistress, she thinks a lot of herself." Then he approached her and told her not to forget, because at any moment he might reveal her secret. 2 years ago, the land of Feridot. Rosalind was very tired of the monotonous rural life, as suddenly, there he was, the new stable boy my father had hired. When the young man approached Rosalind, he smiled sweetly and said that he had no idea that Feridot was inhabited by such a beautiful girl. This beautiful man had won her heart while her father was busy gambling, and he had forgotten all about her. Rosalie and this guy's relationship became very serious. After a while, she informed the stable boy that she was pregnant. Rosalie cried a lot and worried that if her father found out she was pregnant, he would kill her. But the stable boy leaned over to her and said her father would kill him if he found out. "That's what he should do." Glock said to wait. He assured her he would take responsibility. But when his father lost his property and stabbed Morris to death, Glock ran away. Her father committed suicide and she lost her child. Aslan appeared in front of her, sold for her father's debts. He was willing to pay all her debts, on one condition. If Marissa's son came to see her, he had to tell him. Aslan was afraid that this dangerous man might hurt Rosalie too, so he told her. A young handsome duke who was also kind and rich. His wife was often ill and too shy, so her reputation in society is not so good. She thought she could easily replace her. Besides, if it was only a contract marriage, it was obvious that when she left, Rosalind would take her place. Glock said, "Does she really think he will love her even after learning about her past? Who would be happy with a girl who was pregnant by someone else?" Rosalie got angry and slapped Glock's cheek. Then she screamed that he had only tried to say those stupid things to Aslan. She would kill him personally. The girl ran away, but Glock stayed behind. After she said that, he looked at her and thought of something. When Rosalie got home, she wondered what she would do if Glock told Aslan about her past. No. Aslan would kill him when he found him. Aslan is trying to protect her, Rosalie thought, so he'll take her any way he can get her. Spill feeling Aslan still doesn't understand. Remembering that train situation, what should she do? Eris Station. The train on which Aslan was traveling arrived. Then they rode their horses toward Riley's house. Aslan jumped down from his horse and said, "The lady will be frightened if armed men come to her at this early hour. He will go first, and you sit here." As he approached the house, he looked over and thought that Riley was probably still asleep. At that moment, as Aslan looked toward her window, he saw it open and heard a voice say, "Oh my God, Rila, you're awake already." It was her mother's voice. The guy hid behind a tree so he couldn't be seen. Riley replied, "Yes, Mom, already awake. It was the beautiful bird song that woke her up." She leaned out the window and began to breathe the morning air. "It was so good, so fresh," she said. Then she turned toward the house and said that Dad wanted to make breakfast today, didn't he? Dad said, "Riley, wait a little while. It's sure to be his specialty soup today." "Fine," said the girl. She's looking forward to it very much with great anticipation. Aslan heard and saw Riley's voice. He thought, has she always been such a smiling girl? Then Riley asked her brother if there was anything she could help him with, and her brother replied that her sister needed to go gather herbs. Mother shouted that it was still cold outside, dress warmer. Aslan had always thought, as far back as the duchy, that she was always sad and unsure of herself. When they were about to leave, the brother said, "The latecomer will be in charge of the laundry." That's when they raced out of the house with their brother. Riley yells, "Hey, no fair! He got out first!" At that moment, Aslan stood near the tree and saw his wife having fun. How much she smiles and how happy she is. He thought to himself that she had never smiled once in front of him, not smiling as brightly as she was smiling here. He realized that Helena was much happier now than when she was with him. The boy wondered if he dared ask her to even come back when she was smiling so brightly. At the same time in the palace, Rosalie was sitting on her bed musing. Good. When Aslan returns from his journey, she can find out his feelings for her. If he comes back with the Duchess, it means he still has feelings for her. And if one, he was definitely in love with her, with Rosalie. Rosalie was very glad echidnally that Glock couldn't stand up to her either, and she was doing well now. Back to Riley's house. Riley and her brother are picking herbs, and her brother shows her how to do it right, plucking off those loose leaves, he tells her. Just then he heard something. Wondering who was there this early in the morning, Riley asked, "Oh, what's that sound out there?" When she stood up, she saw the silhouette of a man. "Is it?" she thought. "Aslan," said the girl and ran up to him. But it turned out to be a regular groom who delivers the mail. The brother said hello, saying, "Good morning, Hans." The boy also said, "Good morning, Aiden." He brought the morning paper. Aiden said to his sister, "This is their Hans, the mailman. Meet him." The mailman guy said, "Wow, she's beautiful. Nice to meet you." And the girl introduced herself and said she was Riley. "Nice to meet you too." Then she wondered for a moment how she could have thought it was Aslan. That would never happen. The letter carrier boy had a glance at Riley, and Aiden, her brother, said, "Hans, don't look at his sister. She's married." Then Hans said, So you're married? I'm sorry, but..." Riley said, No, that's okay." She was married but recently divorced. Aslan heard these words, and he was very upset, in his heart. Then Hans said, That's how it is. I beg your pardon." But Riley said, "You have nothing to apologize for." The girl thought she should stop thinking about Aslan. He had been too kind to her all these years. It's time for her to stop fooling herself and getting her hopes up. Riley said, "It's okay." On the contrary, she was relieved. Hans said he was glad then. Riley replied, "Thank you for your concern." And the whole conversation was heard by Aslan, standing nearby behind a tree. His brother still said, "Hans, don't look at his sister." Aslan heard the most important words, that she was relieved. Then Hans, the letter carrier, went away, and the mother, looking out of the house, cried out, "It's chilly outside. What are you doing out there walking so long?" Riley said, "Mom, don't worry, it's not cold at all." Aiden replied that he had brought her a newspaper.